Hello and welcome to the Superleague Show here for SimNews.TV. I'm the scrutineer and I'm Mike Pittman. I'm not Jake and I don't even pretend to be, but I'm going to try and fill some very big shoes here. I'm very lucky though to still have Ben and Kacper next to me. So hello, chaps.
Hello.
Hello, everyone.
So this one is about GPVWC's Monaco Grand Prix, which I'm sure you two are very excited to see. Not as many crashes and bodywork parts around the track as I expected, to be honest, guys, but there's still an awful lot to talk about. I think we should start off with some of the drivers. There's quite a few driver changes for this round. We saw Right Kilk jumping in on the Red Archer. We saw Sven Schubert in the Storm, having them fix their contract issues out, or decided to fix their contract issues out. Matthew Churgwin in the Woods, and Gerrit de Vries in at Green Stripes, and a very late edition of Roland in at Madcape. So, guys, anyone surprised you turning up there, or anyone particularly stood out?
I think surprise is an interesting word because a lot of the time we don't always know who will replace people to the last minute. Like seeing Sven Schubert, did he do all 3 career ladder events? He's definitely kicked about in FC, and he may have done Super Cup as well. Not too sure on that, but he was, interesting to see him pop up at Storm. Really, I haven't heard too much about him. But he'll be an interesting one to watch as well. Matthew Churgwin came in at Woods. He's been doing a lot of their setup work this year, so he was, he's pretty experienced with the car. So probably could get a good bit of performance out there as well. De Vries made the big jump from FC as well. That was a surprising one. But it's nice to see sort of the talent from the lower formulas coming up quite quickly.
Yeah, I guess that's what the ladder's there for, that sort of reason. Do you think, Kacper, that we'll see some of these sticking around, or do you think there were more sort of emergency jump-in drivers?
We're going to have to see anyway with how we go. But to be honest, with Rakes doing possibly not doing too badly, we may see some of them come back at the very least for another try.
Yeah, I mean, look at Schubert there in the Storm does have a primary contract, so I'd assume we're going to see him coming back. But some of the others there had jumped in. I think Roland was a very last-minute addition to the grid, helping out that team. He has been sat on the reserve contract for them for all season long so far, but jumping in at the last minute, I'm sure. And like you say, Churgwin as well, reserve at Woods there, Ben. So if we might see him later in the year maybe, or we might see him going forwards. Who knows? There is I hear, Ben, though, that you have seen a few other drivers around on track that we might be seeing in the near future. Yeah,
there's been some mumblings going on that a certain Philip Pushka could be returning. Now, if you haven't been following Super League over the last few years, he was the 2015 champion. Unfortunately, he had to step aside sort of midway through 2016 due to illness, but he has been seen testing on the server, and there are rumours that he may have agreed at some time in 2017 to make a return to. We're expecting Vodball. No mention of a chosen race or if it'll be a primary or reserve contract, but that's big news seeing a former champion come back. He's an extremely fast driver. My only question is, where does he fit onto the grid, given that Vodball have 2 very strong drivers in Van Buren and Kacper at the moment? So maybe he'll come in just to replace one if they know they're going to be away or something, but definitely interesting to see what goes on there.
I'll just quickly say that if of the 2 drivers, the one that's not fighting for a championship at the moment is Ristel, so that's who I'd considering. Pushka was definitely a championship contender, and he would have won the championship last season if not for his illness, to be honest.
Definitely, and Kacper hasn't had the best run over the last few races. Luck's not been on his side, so who knows?
And he lacks the pace of Rudy. That's just a fact.
Is that quite a shock to you guys, though, to be potentially testing another driver when they lead as we'll get onto, they've been leading the championship now?
I don't think it's a shock. Teams do like to keep their options open in case, if it is a planned absence, say if one's going to miss a few races, then they'll want to line up someone, make sure they are comfortable in the car, make sure when it's a team, as high up the grid and as good as Vodball that, it's someone reliable, someone consistent, and someone fast who can score points. So it doesn't surprise me too much, unless of course this is the first the drivers have heard of it, in which case that could be very awkward.
It's one of those leagues where we have seen quite a few returning champions and returning drivers in the same sort of teams as well. So it could well happen. Who knows? And there is another one that we've seen around on track as well, which might be more sooner rather than later, potentially, Kacper.
Yeah, Stefan Rolt has been testing with Deltec. So yeah, from Deltec, from Super Cup Deltec, he has been testing the Nordson car, and he has apparently an offer on the table to replace other drivers from Britain onwards. So not too long away from now, to be fair. And who knows? We'll see if that goes through. But to be fair, I think I know exactly which driver he'd be replacing anyway. Because let's be honest, Geyer has not had the best of runs so far.
Now that's interesting, because I've heard a few mumblings that it may not be Geyer. Although nothing's confirmed, and it would shock me if it was Fiduk who was to disappear, given he's the reigning champion. So
Mr. Consistent.
Exactly, Mr. Consistent as well. It doesn't make sense for it to be Fiduk, but then I've heard mumblings that it may not be Geyer. Who knows? Who knows? I'm really intrigued to see where that one goes, to be honest.
Well, I'm sure we'll keep watching that over the next few rounds and see. They might not show their hand right up until Britain, or even maybe beyond. Who knows? There has been some rumblings on, like you say, it's been, I think, quite common knowledge that Guy has not been happy with his own results. He's been quite vocal on the forums and some of the broadcasts that we've seen. So maybe, but I wouldn't want to guess at this point, I suppose. But do you think that Stefan would fit in well in Super League?
Yeah, I don't see why not. He was really good in FC last year. This year in Super Cup hasn't been as up there as I thought he would be. But give him the right car, give him the right setup. He's a really good driver, and I think Nordson maybe are looking for that consistency, just to pick up points, race in, race out, and
Just to say, just on a side of that, sometimes drivers who are very quick in a certain car don't have to be that quick in another. So he may just not be fitting the C car, and possibly he's just fitting better with these cars. We have seen that with Lars Brugman last year.
That's true, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fair to say that the ladder here is all very different cars up and down, so you can suit one and not the other, I suppose. While we were talking there on Nordson in general, we did debate a little bit about Mr. Fiduk last time on this. Oh, I say we, you two did, with the lovely Jake, about potentially a penalty for Fiduk. Now that has actually come through, didn't it, Kacper?
Yeah, we had a penalty with 5 grid plays, a grid penalty, and now he got he got 4th place last race, I think, was it?
He was demoted down to 4th place.
Yeah.
I think once penalties were applied and stuff.
Yeah, so I think that's exactly how we called it anyway during that, what we thought was going to happen, because that's exactly how it should have been, and I think there's nothing surprising about that, to be honest.
I think it was the correct penalty. It was.
You called it, Ben. You did, to be fair.
Well, it wasn't a massive incident, but equally, I don't think you could just let that slide. It was end of the day, it was a misjudgment. It needs to be penalised, and it was the right penalty.
I think, considering that you could call it, that kind of shows a lot that there's a lot of consistency potentially in the penalties that have been given out at the moment. But the 5 grid penalty, obviously at Monaco, that we're coming on to now, really does hurt you more here than probably anywhere else on the calendar. There wasn't an awful lot. There was some upgrades, but not as many as we probably thought going into this round. And certain, you called it last time as well that you wouldn't want new engines at this race as well, Ben. But we did see a couple out there.
Yeah, Mad Cape. Their hand was sort of forced, I guess. They'd used up a couple of units over the first. 5 races now. So they didn't really have any born engine they could use. They were forced onto a new engine, and it's a shame because Monaco isn't a place you can get power really out of an engine. It's so short. There's no really any straights at all. That a new engine just doesn't have the advantage it would have elsewhere. So it's unlucky for Mad Cape. Maybe they could have tried to strategize around that. They didn't foresee that, but yeah, could hinder them later on in the season when other people have fresh engines.
Yeah, they've. I suppose. Yeah, we might even see that next round. Then that they might have a warm one where most people, I suppose, have used very, like you say, they've almost got a get out of jail free card here. They've managed to use a very worn engine on a grid where it doesn't really matter. So that might hinder them further on the line, I guess, with Mad Cape. Do you think that's being a new team? That's sort of, we've seen a few say questionable decisions by Mad Cape this year so far. Is that expected from a rookie team, Kacper?
Yeah, I do think so. You know, in many ways, because there's a lot of things to behind the scenes in Super League, especially with basically working your cars, upgrades, etc., and with the engines. It's all for a new team. I think it may be a bit overwhelming, and it's just I think it is just a rookie mistake. Yeah, I think they're just gonna have to, once they settle into it, I think is where maybe next year even, but they have to just learn, and you learn through mistakes.
That being said, of course, they are doing quite well in the standings anyway, but let's move on. So qualifying, we jumped into qualifying, and we know at Monaco that this is probably more important than anywhere else on the grid because it is so hard to overtake here. I'll quickly run you through the top 5 because it was rather close all the way up to the very last seconds as well. So we saw Rudy Van Buren taking pole with a 1:12.1. Lee Morris sat in second, Risto Capit in third, Boldy in fourth, and Fiduk in fifth. Did anything really shock us there? I mean, those guys, it's quite, they're the sort of names I expected at the top. Considering it's Monaco and it sometimes throws up surprises, it was a little bit expected to me, Ben.
Yeah, the top 5 is relatively consistent of what it has been for the first few races. It did take Van Buren to the last lap to steal the pole from Morris. But if we look sort of a little lower down, Guy is a bit out of place, so is Tobias Olsen. That's 13th and 14th respectively. And Fran Lopez had a shocker down in P18. That could be down to traffic. Monaco is an absolutely horrible place to try and quali round. You can easily lose a lap just because you haven't got your gaps right, and just catch a car at the wrong place, and there goes your fastest lap. And it could have been as simple as that. So I think if you look at the front, everything's relatively status quo. But yeah, there's a few people out of position.
I'm hearing though, Kacper, that there might have been quite a lot of cuts, potentially as many as 9 back of grid penalties moving into Canada. Does that shock us?
Doesn't really shock us, not at all. Considering it's Monaco, it's basically every corner here has some. You have to kind of try and straight line as much as you can, and sometimes you just go over the line. And here we have flat curbs, and a lot of them. So I'm not surprised at all.
I think people have cut, it will be into the chicanes because the curbs are really flat there, and there is just about a gap you can fit the car before you hit an anti-cut. So that's probably where.
The Marina would probably be some of the more obvious places, yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, I don't think we've seen anyone cutting into the first corner with that lovely anti-cut that was sat there, which I'm sure we'll get onto.
Oh, definitely.
So moving into the race then, so we've seen our top 5 there and they're moving forward. So it almost started out quite status quo, really. I mean, we saw Risto do a leap through. There wasn't actually, because this is Monaco, lap 1, everyone's so close together. We only actually had one retirement on lap 1, and that was Roland, who was at the back, anyway. That to me shows the quality of this grid, really.
Yeah, it was. Apart from one incident, I'm sure we'll mention in a minute, it was actually a really clean first few corners. Which, when you look at Formula Challenge and the massive crash they had at turn 1, and Super Cup wasn't, it was a little better, a little cleaner. But I think it was a really good start for what really wide cars. It can be really tough to go side by side on that first lap. But yeah, there was some pretty good clean driving on the first lap.
Yeah, it was definitely a lot cleaner than I would have thought. When you look at those cars, it looked like as if they could barely make it, and yet all there was is just Nick, which was, I think it's just impressive.
Well, we did wonder because the cars were a bit wider this year, new spec, that sort of stuff. But we did see a bit of a problem away from maybe the front few, but we did see a bit of a problem at the hairpin a bit further down the lap. You want to talk us through that one, Ben?
Yeah, I sat there for a good 30 seconds. It was, yeah, the hotel seemed to have moved its parking lot onto that hairpin for a brief 30 seconds.
I hope you got valet.
I wish. But it was a weird one. I think someone just made a dive down the inside into the hairpin, misjudged it a little bit. Really easy to do. And once you've got one car blocking the track there, it is one and a bit cars wide. Nobody could get through. And I think it was about 8 to 10 cars, including myself, were just stuck there for a good 30 seconds till everything sorted itself out. Which does beg the question: was nobody retired? I do feel maybe that was a red flag situation. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
With being blocked for 30 seconds, then again, when do you call a red flag? How long does something have to be blocked? And if the situation can sort itself out fairly quickly, which 30 seconds is a long time in racing, but in reality, it's not that long of a time in general.
That is true.
Yeah, so it's also not very long for the race director to potentially make that call as well. Like you say, it's 30 seconds is a lot of time when you're sat in a car waiting for the car in front of you to move. Time will move very slowly for you, but the potentially, and like you say, nobody did retire from it, but arguably the racing may have been hindered slightly because of it. I'm sure you sound very frustrated, Ben.
Well, it was an interesting route. I'm pretty sure I did get flung in the air at one point when someone decided to try and push through the crowd of cars. But that's the risk of Monaco, isn't it? It's so narrow that when one thing does go wrong, you can end up with traffic jams like that.
I suppose, and that just then throws up everyone's different strategy calls and what you do in that circumstance, and do you have a plan B for that sort of thing? And so in going into that, the race did carry on. Everyone did get moving again, albeit 30 seconds back. But sort of the front half of the grid, I suppose, cracked on and moved forward as expected. We did see some varying. Everyone started on the same tyres, but we saw some varying length on those tyres as well, and the tyre strategies. We should have mentioned, I suppose, before this, showing that I'm not quite Jake. The tyres. There was two teams that chose a slightly different compounds to everybody else. Everyone had the Ultra Softs, but we did have two teams that didn't have the Super Softs like everyone else. In Vodball and Street Fighter. We've seen Street Fighter use harder tyres in the last couple of races as well, actually, I think. Definitely at the last one. So just looking at that sort of stuff, it's interesting that that's the first time Vodball has changed from their strategy as well. Being the top team, we have seen quite a few people follow theirs. Was that a bit of a surprise, and do you think it was the right call at the end of the day?
I know Kacper will probably have a go at me for this, but I think the mediums actually work this time. Because the track is again short, so you don't get the time differential per lap as you would on a longer circuit, and it's so narrow and so hard to pass that you're not necessarily going to lose track position by running a slower tyre. I think at the end of the day it came down to a battle in the pits and how many fewer pit stops he could do. We saw Bart de Vos only doing 4 stops, and he ended up P4, which is really good for the Kerr now. That's up 4 from his quali spot. Both Van Buren and Capit were using the harder compounds they had, and again that just allowed them to keep track position. And we look at the two people who did 8 stops, Lewis Redshaw and Gogo Baldi, who were just going ultra soft, super soft. And not being able to make those tyres last, that may have hindered them slightly in that they had to stop a lot more, and you can't necessarily get past on track. There's places you can do it, but it's so much harder at Monaco.
Well, I'll put it this way. It's very funny how it's the exact opposite of real life, where you use the softest possible tyre and they barely ever use up in Monaco. So I always find that a bit funny. But aside from that, you're racing your race as the cards are given to you. And at this point, I'm also looking at Rudy doing 5 stops, but then you look at Fidok, 5 stops, Bart de Vos, 4 stops. Rista would be the same, but someone there we go, another one, Thomas Hintz, 4 stops. And then you think to yourself, they haven't done any more stops. Some of them didn't, at least. And they're on softer tires, so mediums don't have to necessarily work as well. Although they did work in the end, and obviously for Rudy. But yeah, were they worth it? I don't know.
We saw some of those cars becoming effectively roadblocks to some of the guys that were doing 8 stops. I particularly remember David Franchik in the Street Fighter on his much harder compounds holding up lots of people, and equally very much near the start when Bart DeVos and David Fidek kept their tyres lasting longer, as you just said there, Kacper. They held up Rudy once he'd pitted. So that was, even the leader was being held up. It wasn't the effective leader, I suppose. So its track position was everything this time, wasn't it?
Well, as it is in Monaco. Monaco is just a track where, unless, as we're going to get to later, unless you're someone like Lee Morris, you're just not going to overtake here. It's just near impossible. It's just so tight.
So I suppose moving into that then, should we get... so we spoke. I just quickly mentioned there that people like Bart and Fidek carried on their tyres a bit longer. But the people like, as you mentioned, with Morris and Boldy, they were using their tyres very aggressively and just burning through them and doing 8 stops. Now, they did mix it up, and from an outsider looking at it, you can normally see how teams choose their strategy, whether it's the right strategy or not. Like we saw Red Archer last time out using lots of ultra soft tyres, for example, and then you see Street Fighter using lots of mediums. You can see where they're going with it. But people like Boldy and Morris, they used pretty much all their tyres as if they were sort of more ad hoc doing it, depending on how other people were doing, and if they got held up, they changed to this tyre and that. Do you think there was a lot of strategy changing that went on over the grid?
I don't think there was strategy changing per se from the people who were doing more stops. I think for them it was a case of bolt on the softest compound and we will get past, no matter how. And I think we saw that in Morris's driving. He was pretty aggressive at points. I know he had a bit of a run-in with Kacper at one point. There's a few other places where he was, just clonking into cars a little bit. Yeah, Baldy as well. But that's how he had to make his strategy work. He had to get past. He had to use up, his ultra softs and his super softs when they were fresh. And if that meant having to barge someone slightly out the way, then that's what he had to do. Okay, it will be looked by the DC to check it's all legal. But
how do we feel on that? Is that a legitimate strategy call for a racer? Or is that a racer, actually, as in going for it, as in I want to get past?
I think that's a racer at Monaco. I don't think it's necessarily legitimate, but that's the only way you could make a multi-stop pit stop like that strategy work. When you're pitting as many as 8 times, losing 30, 40 seconds on other cars because you're in the pit stops for longer, you have to go all out on track, almost setting hot laps every single lap, and you have to get past no matter how. And if he's done it illegally, then I'm sure the DC will be on him. If he's done it legally, then brilliant.
Well, it made it exciting stuff for us, though, didn't it, Kacper, to be honest? So you can sometimes find that Monaco can be a bit of a possession, but to be honest, this was anything but this time.
No, it was absolutely fantastic. It was some of the moves were absolutely incredible, although they were a bit scary. So that one move where I can't remember, was it an attack on Fidok or somebody, and he went side by side, or was it Capet? I can't remember. But then Baldy goes into the pits right in front of him, and the whole situation was caused by Baldy just holding them both up. And there is a bit of contact between them two, and he's between Baldy and Lee Morris, and Lee Morris still manages to overtake the other driver, which kind of is just mind-boggling.
Yeah, I mean, that's the sort of thing with Monaco, that you're rarely, even if you're overtaking someone, you're rarely the only one around that car. There's always somebody else that is impacted either in front or behind, so you have to take in so many different factors. It is really inspiring to see somebody actually going for it at Monaco. It was exciting. Not necessarily saying I agree with everything that went on, but particularly, I'm slightly biased, but at the same time, trying to avoid that, it was quite aggressive. Which we saw people like Rudy didn't have to do that, for example. Other drivers managed to move their way quite far up the grid. It probably never didn't overtake all race outside the pits.
Yeah, I think Monaco's always a key race of strategy. And as we keep saying, people who did too many pit stops compared to others, they had to do their pass on track, which it's not easy at all at Monaco. Other people let the pits do the talking for them. As I said, one of the big standouts for me was Thomas Hintz, who was up 12 places on a 4-stop strategy using, softs and super softs, just because he could make them last. He could make them last the distance and keep people behind him when he needed to, and that gained him plenty of spots. He did brilliantly.
Yeah, it's 2 races in a row now that we're praising Thomas Hinds, eh?
He's been doing really well. He does really well with time management, I think.
I think it actually makes 3 races in a row, because the race before that he actually did really well as well, if I recall correctly.
He's on a roll.
Well, let's see what can happen at Canada then. Great stuff, Thomas. Looking at the race itself, as we were sort of going through there, I know we sort of said that it was a bit aggressive by Morris and stuff. There was an instant which probably did impact the potential podium. We saw Mr. Kacper sat in second place, lapping a slow Fran Lopez. Didn't all go to plan though, did it, Ben?
No, and I think at the moment Kacper just can't catch a break of luck, really. That's twice he's lost a podium due to other people's misfortune, shall we say. It was a weird one. It was Lopez was going quite slow up into Raskas. Obviously, he had the blue flags. Kacper was coming around to lap him. Kacper naturally went to the outside, and Lopez just, I don't know if he lost concentration or something, but he clipped the inside wall, and that just spat him straight into Kacper, spun Kacper. He backed into the outside wall, right outside the cafe at Raskas, and completely lost his rear wing. And I don't think he noticed, because he then decided to go and drive another lap without going straight into the pits. So that cost him a lot of time, a lot of downforce, and at the end of the day, the podium really, and all because of a little bit of bad driving from Lopez. It's hard for Kacper, really. I think he's 2 races now where he's lost the podium, just because of other people's, misfortunes.
Yeah, although something I found very interesting is that he wasn't as slow as you would think without a rear wing, especially at Monaco.
Yeah, have you ever tried driving Monaco without a rear wing, Kacper?
It wouldn't be easy, no.
He did a whole lap and was he only dropped a couple of places, to be fair. He'd get about 5th or 6th by the time he got into the pit lane.
Yeah, I was very impressed.
It did show the gap that potentially the VBs had off some people further back in the grid. But yeah, I expect the moment that happened, I expected him to be right at the back of the pack, in all honesty. Maybe that 30 seconds Ben sat at the at the hairpin helped.
Yeah, it also happened relatively into the race as well. So a couple of the back markers had been lapped already. So he didn't lose as much time as I think he could have. Obviously, he ended up being lapped by his teammate, who went on to win the race. But it's just a shame for Kacper. 2 podiums now he's lost, and I do feel for him, because both times it hasn't been his fault.
He did then pit though, Kacper, for your favourite tyres.
Yeah,
and when the rest of the race on the mediums, which I suppose if you've had that sort of setback, you have to do something different.
You may as well try something different. That's true, yeah. And to be fair, again, they did use it, and to be fair, it has been used, and that's on the track that I expected the least. But I still don't see anything harder than this tire to be used.
How's that humble pie tasting, mate?
I'll run away to Mars just not to answer that question.
No,
there you go, Jake. I managed to get him to say that mediums were acceptable.
They were still not as good as softs. Oh wait.
Well, still, it just shows actually that yes, I completely agree with you. I don't think we're going to see those hards somewhere. I know Ben, you might want to use them at Silverstone, but I I'm not getting into that debate again with you two. Staying well clear of that one. I'll leave that to Jake.
Fair play.
But just the fact that they were used by somebody who got quite high up as well to finish, back up the top again, effectively, not on the podium, granted, but to get himself back up there, it's still quite an achievement when everyone else is pitting around you and at Monaco. Something that is interesting, though, is the amount of finishes in general, actually. This is Monaco. We've seen races where we get down to like 9, 10 people. To actually have the amount of finishes we did was quite impressive for the grid as well, to be honest.
Yeah, it was pretty good. We've seen, I wouldn't say worse attrition. I think we've seen equal attrition to here, but we still got everybody in the points finishing plus one more. So it was.
Yes, congratulations for finishing, Ben. You can have
thanks.
a SimNews.TV point. Well done.
Yes!
Congratulations for finishing.
First points. But no, it was.
Not redeemable for real points. Terms and conditions apply.
It was relatively clean though, I think. Apart from obviously the few incidents we've touched on, the only sort of major retirements were, people crashing of their own accord, really, which is relatively easy to do at Monaco. Just a lapse of concentration, and it can all go pretty wrong. But in terms of actual, driver-on-driver battles, it was, pretty clean.
Yeah, we're getting on to sort of driver-on-driver battles, I suppose, sort of teams and that sort of stuff. You look at, we mentioned Lopez there touching Kacper. That sounds wrong. Lopez accidentally hitting Kacper potentially, or Kacper getting in the way, however you look at it.
Well rephrased.
He was nowhere near the Lopez we've seen at these races. I know you've sort of spoken before. He's sort of like a yo-yo. He has an amazing race and a terrible race and amazing. Was this just his turn to be terrible?
To be honest, he's done quite badly last race as well. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just the track that doesn't suit him again. I really don't know what's happening with Fran, because Fran has done some amazing work in a couple of races and then some absolutely horrid work in other races this season. He's done something amazing last season. I really don't know what's happening with Fran. And at this point, he just seems like like not just a yo-yo, but just an erratic, chaotic fury more than anything else.
Wow. Okay. Well,
the scientist in Kacper there.
He's meant to be, arguably you don't have number 1 and 2 drivers here, but considering he was the one that was there at the start of the season, you'd assume that he's effectively Adonis's number 1 driver. But he was showing up here.
Well, it's interesting because from what I've heard, he has a lot of input into how the teams run, how the car's built, even down to, I know he was trying to get the livery shaped to how he wanted it. Which, let's say, the livery designer wasn't too pleased with. But
don't mess with livery designers, honestly. No. It's like interior designers and things like that. Just don't mess with them. Let them do what they need to do. They do great work.
Yeah, he did get showed up here though. And Lopez this year has reminded me of Max Verstappen more and more. I said it last race. He can have a really good race. He can be right up there on pace. And then equally turn up next week and he's nowhere. There's no consistency. He's making really stupid errors. He's hitting other people. And if he wants to be champion, if he wants to do really well, he needs to put the consistency in.
I mean, to be fair, he did finish. It's about all I can say.
True. And he did get points.
And he did get points. He did get lapped twice and once by his own teammate. Now that hurts.
That is a bit embarrassing. Well, especially when Hoekstra isn't necessarily a primary driver for Adonis. He's in as, I think, an emergency at the moment. So
is he? You think getting him knocking on the door, going, I want that drive now? Is that
maybe.
He's done some good results there.
Maybe because Adonis don't actually have a second primary since Canton left, so they've been using sort of fill-ins between Jordan and Hoekstra. So who knows? He maybe just may have just shown his stock really.
The other one, Kacper, that we normally talk about in these things, but hasn't really been mentioned yet, is Boldy. Race winner this year and had some bad luck, we'll say again. Some potential interesting strategy calls, but potentially some more bad luck, I'd imagine.
A lot of bad luck. Some contact with Morris. Again, I think it was him coming into pits and getting shot from behind. But then again, Morris, I feel personally, at least at that moment, couldn't have seen him coming. But or couldn't have seen what's happening at least. But yeah, he generally just had bad luck later on, if I recall correctly. It's just one of those races for Boldy. Just maybe not a lucky track. Plus, he did do 8 stops in the end, and on a track like this, it's bound to be an unlucky end.
Yeah, I mean, those Walters and Mad Kate pit crews are getting one hell of a workout this year, it must be said. They're getting their money's worth out of them. So there's probably one other person, I think, a couple that didn't have the best of races, and that's not really their own fault, and that's down to the track. We mentioned before the anti-cut in turn 1. It did catch a couple of people out though, didn't it, Ben?
Yeah, Florian Guy had an interesting trip when he touched that turn 1 anti-cut, and so did Right Click. I did see his, and it was just a Red Archer doing like a barrel roll and going upside down into the turn 1 outside wall. Wasn't pretty. I do have to question why it was put there and why it was as severe as it was, because we saw it cause a red flag in FC on the first lap. You know, a couple of FC cars barrel rolled over it, and the fact it's managing to roll, you know, pretty heavy Super League cars, it's a bit concerning. I'd like to see that change next year, to be honest, because I think it's spoiled it a bit.
Is there not the flip side to that, I suppose, just playing devil's advocate to you here, Ben? If you've seen that at FC, you don't drive there.
True, but then, firstly, do all the Super League drivers watch FC? I don't know. And
Well, they should. It's a fantastic series.
that is true.
Shameless plug.
But as a driver, obviously, you want to get that fastest lap time, and that means sometimes taking some liberties with the track and pushing it as much. Especially at Monaco, especially if you're going for an undercut or something on the guy in front, you want that really quick lap time. And it's very easy to make a mistake over a 78 lap race. I don't think it should be punished with a flipping car into a wall, but you know.
No, just playing devil's advocate with you there. You know,
That's fair enough.
We'll see what went on. But there was some good results out of this. I know we've spoken a lot of negatives there, really, but there was some actually really strong results. Obviously, we got Rudy Van Buren up front, who holds a flag victory near enough. There was only 1 point after the first pit stop. I think he was behind anyone. After that, he had clear air and pitted into clear air, and all was good. Which is great, and that makes his third win in a row. I know last time, Ben, you sort of saying how, you know, we can't think of any more expletive how good he is. Well, I'm going to ask you for some, but at the same time,
I'm lacking. So
are you lacking? Okay, you've had 2 weeks. Come on.
Let me go get a thesaurus. Hold on.
But can he go for 4? Now we haven't actually seen that in the R Factor 2 era. We haven't seen it at Super League since 2012, which was back on R Factor 1. Is that a possibility?
I don't see why not. I do think other teams will be bringing upgrades to Canada. I'm sure we'll talk a bit more about that later, but Van Buren is just so strong in that football car. It seems so well hooked up. I keep saying it every week because it is. As a matter of fact, nobody can get near that. It just grips well. It has brilliant drive out corners, and Van Buren's just a class driver. End of the day, and nobody can really hold a candle to him. 51-second winning margin is pretty huge at Monaco. So, you know, great job, and I see no reason why you can't do 4 in a row.
Yeah, and he does all that while treading his tires really well.
Yeah, he's the perfect driver. It's crazy.
It should be said that people did go longer on the tyres in this race than we have seen previously, like last time out where he did more than anyone else. We have seen people doing longer on the tyres than him this time. Was there a small weakness there, do we think? Was there the opportunity for somebody to have beaten him here? I'm thinking particularly we had, say, Feidek in second, which was a very strong P2, but if he didn't have that grid penalty, Kacper, do you think he could have been right there?
50 seconds? No. Just he would
have been closer.
It would have been closer, but I still don't think he would have had a chance against Rudy, to be honest. But yeah, there may have been Rudy may have shown a bit of weakness, or we have seen that other drivers are starting to catch up with understanding of the cars. So it could be that David has actually finally got on with it. And as much as I have criticized him, and everyone will, and I think anybody who watched the first few episodes this season will definitely remember how I criticized Feidek very heavily. I think he's done an amazing job to come back and to start doing really, really well over the last few races. And yeah, he could be up there very soon and fighting for wins again.
Which is great. And the other one that could have done well of it, obviously we told about Risto. He was only 5 seconds back from Rudy at the time of his accident. So you never know. Maybe there was a bit closer chance here than most places for the VBs to mix it together. We'll never know, I suppose. We might see next time out. So the other good result, Ben, which I know you'll be very happy about with your Trinity links, Redshaw. And Churgwin, to be honest, but Retro particularly, but both the Woods guys both scored.
Yeah, good job from Team Woods, really. The car was one of the only not to be upgraded for Monaco, and they put on a really good showing, really. Retro had a good qualifying and managed to stay up there. I think he was a little annoyed that he may have lost out once or twice on an undercut, but P8 is a really good result and a good 8 points there. And Matt to come in, I think they had 2 days notice. that he'd need to jump in, and to come in and score a point on your debut is really good job. So Montreal will be interesting. Rumours I've heard is we're going to be getting some engine upgrades, which will be very welcome, shall we say, for all the Trinity customers. So yeah, it's going to be should be a good race for us.
Well, I'll quickly run you through the actual results as well. So I know we've touched on it there. So we did see Rudy win by 50 seconds, as you said. Fido coming second, Lee Morris third, Mark DeVos a very credible fourth. Kacper got himself back up to fifth. Cooper, which actually he had a few instances as well during the race, but he did manage to put himself into sixth. Franchik in the SRS quite impressed me, sat in seventh, but we'll get onto that sort of thing. Bradshaw scored eighth, Holzer in ninth, and Boldy in 10th. Just thought I'd quickly tell you those. We're up to date with that. As you mentioned there, though, Ben, moving into sort of next round and the upgrades and what we can sort of expect potentially. Said there, Woods, they didn't bring anything to this one, whereas you would have expected them to. They only actually brought one to the race before, so potentially they could have some really big upgrades for Canada. There could potentially be some others as well. Bob Bull, Red Archer, and Storm are on that sync at the same time. But the engine manufacturers, as you mentioned there, most of them haven't. Well, Valiant was always on a different sort of sync to everybody else, but now two other manufacturers seem to have decided, you know what, Monaco wasn't a power-based circuit. We'll go on to Canada with them as well.
Seems the logical choice, really. It's an extra 2 weeks of development time, which that's what can be around 20%, around that mark, and that's a sizable upgrade, especially in the power department, and it will help at Montreal. Obviously got the massive long back straight and front straight as well. It really is a power track, and also any teams that are going to bring car upgrades, I'd expect some form of drag or weight upgrade here. Just something again for top speed, really. That's what's key around Montreal. I think if the Woods upgrade is as sizable as I'm led to believe, it would be pretty massive, and I'd like to see him, pushing into the top 10 really.
Well, they need something, don't they? Let's be honest. They have struggled a bit this year, and verbally so. I think if you speak to any of the team and drivers, they've not been particularly happy this year. But hopefully, they'll give them a chance to step forward. Do we then think that the one engine manufacturer did bring something here? Then Talos. Do you think that was a mistake then, Kacper?
Talos.
Knowing that they can't then bring anything to Canada.
Yeah, to be honest. You didn't really think that anything to do with upgrades in Monaco or anything to do with engine work in Monaco is a bit of a mistake, because again, it's not a track where you would be wanting to show any improvements, because you can't, because this is not this is just basically a downforce track. So you nearly wanted for Canada, or wait a little bit longer to have a bit more to put in for Canada, since that's going to be very much a powerhouse track.
And it's not as if they got an advantage as well from it. Highest house car was P6 with Cooper, so they weren't exactly challenging the top 5 with that upgrade. Yeah,
obviously that upgrade, they carry that through to Canada anyway, but yes, they're quite likely to now be potentially the worst for Canada. But then they're now the only one that's off sync, so they could see a benefit on their own race, whereas everyone else brings their upgrade. So that could, down the line, help them out actually, although I think all in agreement there, it might have hurt them this time and next time out. The one little thing that you did pick up on last time, and I know I picked up on the scrutiny as well, was Storm. So Storm, you guys highlighted last time, had put three primary drivers on their contract system, and equally as well as a reserve. Now, I know this is sort of all in the hands of the DC, isn't it, Ben? But what on earth could we see happen here? They have fixed it now, it must be said, but at the time of the race, they hadn't. So they fixed it going forwards. So it's not an issue going forwards in that Gagzella's primary contract has now gone. So do we probably assume then that he's not now racing this season, or at least for much of the season, which says to us that Schubert is now going to be a sort of stand-in for the rest of the year, probably, now with his primary deal. What do we think can come of this then, really?
It's a tough one. I mean, obviously the situation's been resolved now. And it looks like Schubert will be taking over a primary. But during the race, obviously it being an official session, they did have 3 primary and 1 reserve contracted. which is a rule break of, and I have it up here, Rule 7.4, which is the contract cap, where you're not allowed to have more than 3 primary or reserve drivers under contract at any one time.
I'm meant to be the scrutineer. I'm meant to be the one giving these out. Come on, Ben. You're taking.
I want to be technical for a
Storm.
bit.
Fine. I'll hand over the baton. Come along. What regs are we breaking?
So yeah, 7.4 contract cap. There is no mention of any penalty. Now, that is interesting because I have always been under the assumption that if you're to break a contract rule, you've effectively raced with an invalid contract, and that should be a disqualification. Which, and to be slightly biased here, would move myself into P15 and get me a point. So, you know, I like a disqualification.
I see, that's the interest.
But equally, there's no state penalty, so we could quite clearly see a fine here.
So equally, is that, although it may help you, is that not quite harsh on, in this case, Schubert, I suppose, in that he drove his race well, got some points, nothing wrong on track?
Yeah, I mean, the driver's done nothing wrong here. It's fundamentally a team management issue, and that is tended to be penalised with fines. But technically, he has raced under an invalid contract. You know, it's a tough one, and that's why the DC is in charge of this. As I say, I'd like to see disqualification, but then obviously I'm biased. So,
well, in that case, Kacper, be my impartial man here, right? So we've got a situation like this sort of thing. You're a team manager now. This is Super League, and it's all about teams as well. It's not just the driver, as we know. We've got all these upgrades. We talk about tyre choices and all this sort of stuff going on. Is this sort of thing? This is a team. This isn't Madcap. This isn't their first season. Yeah. Is this a huge error that could cost them big, or is it going to be a minor thing that we think might give them a small fine or even a big fine?
Honestly, something like that. I think it is a big enough issue, to be honest, to warrant any kind of a penalty up to getting a disqualification. Honestly, it doesn't sound that major, but it is. If you think if anybody like Vaultbull accidentally did it, it would be a massive scandal. So why, if a smaller team had the same issue, why be lenient? So no, I'd say this is a big issue.
It sets a precedent as well. I think it's worth saying.
Yes, I don't think this has happened before.
No, and it can be used tactically. That's the thing.
In my knowledge, we've seen people DQ'd when they haven't had contracts, or they've driven for too many teams, or something along those lines potentially. So maybe that is a precedent. I wouldn't want to say. So subtly, I think we've sort of come to an interesting end. We'll probably find out before we see the next one what on earth's gone on with that when we're at Storm. While we're quickly sort of going through, is there anything that was particularly stood out? Any best drivers or teams for each of you guys?
I'll just quickly say this. Honestly, Fidok will be probably my standout driver. Just at Monaco to raise eight spots and finish in second place, that's impressive.
For me, Thomas Hintz, brilliant drive with a 4-stop and up 12 places. And best team is a tough one. Naturally, you do have to say Vaultbull because they did really well points-wise. And yeah, they did really well. Woods, honourable mention as well for double score there as well. Yeah,
is that their first double score this year, actually?
It could be, actually.
I think it is. Good on them. That's fantastic. It is. I'm sorry if it's not a disservice, but I believe it is, and it's fantastic, and let's hope it all carries on. Moving into carrying on, we're going into Canada. So in particular, we've talked about power there. Anything else we should be looking out for before the race?
Obviously, upgrades, power we've talked about. Setup was going to be pretty crucial, especially around brakes. We've seen a couple of brake failures here before. I do remember Thomas van der Voort, I think, back at Nijo a few years ago, didn't get his brakes set up right and ended up backwards in the turn 3-4 chicane wall, which is not a nice sight. And tyres, I'd expect everybody to be going soft as compounds here. I don't see an advantage for once by taking a harder compound, so I'd expect ultra softs, super soft softs, and basically going all out on them really.
You must be happy with that, Kacper. Lots of soft tyres. But we've seen them all do Monaco with all the walls. So does that mean we're not going to see anyone hit the wall of champions in Canada?
We'll see about that, to be fair. But with so few people hitting the wall here, I think they're going to choose to the cars enough to avoid that specific wall. Who knows about all the other walls? But we'll see. Maybe they're just specifically going to avoid this one.
There are a lot of walls at Montreal. I think we can see a few of them in them.
Compared to Monaco, I think we'll be fine.
True.
We do hit we're very nearly done. We do hit the third of the season down though. That's gone quick, hasn't it? Let's be honest. I know we've just seen our drivers of the of the weekend, I suppose. Anyone so far for this first third of the season?
For best, obviously Van Buren has dominated. Hintzey, I don't know why I say Hintzey. Thomas Hintz, we all call him Hintzey. He's had a really good last few races, and he's been really impressive. And I guess for the not so good trend, Lopez needs to do a lot better with consistency. And Daniel Sharanko as well, who has DNF'd from 4 of the 6 races and only scored once with 1 point. Now, that Welters is a very good car. He really needs to pick up his game because that's pretty poor compared to Gogo Baldi.
Yeah, I'll definitely say that, well, drivers of the first third of the season, how can you not mention Rudy? I mean, he's just completely dominating everybody. But that Lee Morris is doing a fantastic job. And we have seen some good drives from, again, Thomas Hintz and Bart de Vos, who's also keeping up there at all times, which is good to see. And then on the negative trends, yeah, Fran Lopez had a couple of good races, but for the most part is having an awful season. Daniel Chiranku, yeah, also, as you said, 4 retirements, not good. And Florian Geyer, let's be honest, he's not having a good season. And he's not doing very well for himself so far. He has had a couple decent races, but he has not been. But now that David Fiduk has actually picked up his pace, Geyer is still not doing as well.
Completely agree with you guys there, really. It's pretty fair. So, on the standings point of view, we're now at the third point of the season. So as you say there, Rudy Van Buren up there with 120 points. Lee Morris sat in second, Baldi in third, Kacper in fourth, and Fiduk in fifth. All of those sort of reasonably close to each other, as well as Cooper in sixth. From a team's perspective, he says, looking for the paperwork, we have Bob Boy in first with 201 points, nearly double Nordgen in second. Mad Cape sitting there in third with Walters fourth and Hawkeye in fifth. It is quite close. We've actually seen Kerno and Ren Archer sort of joint next up with 55 points each, which is pretty close, and Adonis on 54, one after. So very close all up and down the grid, really, which is fantastic to see. I like Green Stripes are a little bit off the pace, but it could all change as the season progresses and the car upgrades come on. Any final words, guys?
I'm looking forward to Canada. It should be a very interesting race. And pretty for Monaco, a decent race, all right.
Yeah, considering this is a track that some leagues don't do, I'm really happy that we have done it here. It's been so exciting for us to watch. I've rewatched it a few times now, to be honest. Not just because I'm doing this show and wanted to try and sit in front and do Jake's role justice, but nonetheless, it's been great to watch. Future shows, though, we've got an awful lot coming up here at SimNews.TV. If you like what you heard here, I'm back on the 31st of May with the Scrutineer, which tell you everything about the race ahead of Canada. Tom Parker is back with his Parker's Pit Stop on the 5th of June. He's got a great one lined up there, another great guest. And then this show is back, I'm hoping, with Jake the week after the race, 8 p.m. on the Thursday. And the Super Cup show is in between as well on the Wednesday. Subscribe below, though, and you won't miss out on any of this. You can also catch and ask these guys anything you want on the Twitter, which is SL Show SN even, and SL Show on the hashtag. All those sort of things can be seen then by Ben and Kacper, and I'm sure they'll get around to answering your questions. and anything else that you can think to ask us. I've been Mike, and from Ben and Kacper as well, we thank you, and we shall see you in a few weeks' time.